Hello, and you are watching A Sister's Point of View, the conversation. I'm Tanya Kennedy.
And I'm Sharika Dash.
I'm Jim Rumford.
All right, Jim, we are here today. The title of this live today is Deep State Coronavirus. Now, I don't know in which direction you are going to take us. I have a funny feeling, I might be wrong, but I have a funny feeling we're getting ready to go down a rabbit hole. And so if we're getting ready to go on an Alice in Wonderland journey, I am excited and I'm ready. So give us some insight on what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Well, excuse me. Apparently, we're going to talk about the deep state. And President Trump talked about the deep state when he was running for president. But the deep state is not just today. The deep state came 135 years ago. The deep state came. The deep state came after the Civil War into the 1890s, 2000, or 1900, 1910. That's when the deep state got its roots. It got its roots through the trust, the banking trust, the steel mill trust, the tobacco trust, the oil trust, all the trust guys, all the money guys kept their money tied up into the trust, which was like the steel mill trust, railroad trust. All these trusts were put together to keep the working man down and work for starvation wages. The tobacco farmer to sell his crops for little money. And so this thing goes back to that period. Now, fast forward today, you still have the deep state who runs and controls most everything in the country. So
now, why is President Trump using that term now? What makes him think that that's what's going on?
Well, from what I've heard from his campaigns and from his speeches and from people that involved in him, you have tremendous corruption in the government. You have corruption in the Senate, the Congress, the State House, the courthouse, and the township office. The corruption goes on and on. The corruption is there. Well, let's take Dayton, Ohio. That's where I live. Back in the summer, the FBI came in and raided the city of Dayton, Ohio, arrested 4 people for corruption. And they, big time. Also, the same day, the FBI raided Cleveland, Ohio, and arrested 4 key people up there. Now, the people they arrested in Dayton, Ohio, they were accused of, because they got busted, of, if let's say that you're a contractor and I'm the buyer in the city of Dayton. You come to me and I say to you, if you want this contract, I want you to give me a patio, a swimming pool at my house, and do all these things for me. Excuse me just a minute. I'm going to sneeze. Guess not.
That's how I feel too. That's how I feel too right now.
So the payola system is, what can you do for me if you want this contract? So the contractor says, I'll build you a pool and patio for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and he gets the contract. So then the deep state people, the bad guys of the government, are passing these contracts out to get payola on their benefit. So that's just one example. That's what they're being charged with. But now in Dayton, supposedly the mayor's involved, Mary Whalen, and about 30 or 40 people are involved. Now, how this all turns out, we don't know, because you're not guilty until proven guilty in a court of law.
Right.
So that's all coming up. But the FBI is very much involved in this here in Dayton and also in Cleveland. But many, many cities are like this. Many counties are like this. Many states are like this. It's not who you know, it's what you know, or it's not what you know, it's who you know. So that's the beginning of the deep state. But back 125 years ago, the deep state was the guys who put together the trust, the banking trust, the tobacco trust, all those guys that we talked about. But they created monopolies. So for an example, the tobacco trust with James Buck Duke, who created that. His father came back from the Civil War and came home and found 5 tobacco barns on their farm. And they said, instead of trying to grow tobacco, we're going to process it and make products. So they started their business in a chicken coop. Now, you girls are from the South. You know what the chicken coops are. You know, in the chicken coop, you got the pecking order of the hens. The top hen pecks down to the lower hen, pecks down the bottom hen. So they started their business in a chicken coop. And I cleaned out chicken coops as a kid, and they're not very big. They don't smell very good. So they had smoking tobacco, snuffing tobacco, chewing tobacco, pipe tobacco, and they made these products off those 5 barns full of tobacco. Then as things progressed from the Civil War, say the 1870s, 80s, and 90s, tobacco was a big product. So you had many companies in the tobacco business making all these products. So Buck Duke, he started to buy up his competition. It's called vertical integration. You've probably heard this slang before. Vertical integration is when you go out there and you buy up your competition. In the case of the Duke family, they bought up 150 processing plants that made many, many different types of tobacco all through North America. Then they were able to complete and have a monopoly on the sale of tobacco. So now what happened in those years is tobacco buyers would roam through the tobacco patch of Kentucky, Tennessee, the Carolinas, Virginia, buying tobacco from farmers. And at a good price. Some of these guys were making 10, 20, 15, 20, 30, even 35 cents a pound for tobacco, which was a lot of money. That's how they built many of those mansion houses that run through the Kentucky, Tennessee, the Carolinas, and Virginia. And so that's where the money came from, because tobacco was a big industry. So Buck Duke was able to buy up his competition. So then you come up to 1895, 1890, and there was no more buyers out there buying tobacco except Buck Duke. So the price went from, say, a high of $35 a pound down to 25, 20, 15, 10 cents a pound. It went down to a penny, 2 cents a pound. So the tobacco farmer couldn't make any money. And so they got upset. And they then formed the tobacco. That's when the tobacco wars started. There was 650,000 people involved, 10,000 night riders riding through the night, pulling farmers out of their house that was selling to the trust and horsewhip them. Then they go back and they burn down the tobacco farms. The barns were burned down. The tobacco crops were destroyed by riders riding through the crop. The army came out to protect the farmers, to no avail. And then they started burning down warehouses. The warehouses in Covington, Kentucky, Brooksville, Kentucky, into Cynthiana, Lexington, Hopkinsville, Kentucky. They would burn many tobacco warehouses down, which starved the price of tobacco. Now, the idea was to restrict the price of tobacco and raise the price back up. It really didn't work. So these guys rode from 1902 to 1908. And then we had a superhero walked in like Donald Trump. His name was Teddy Roosevelt. And Teddy Roosevelt was known as the tobacco buster, or the trust buster. And so over the years, through those early teens, or early 1902 to 1908, Teddy Roosevelt then processed with the Supreme Court and got the first guy to break up the trust was John D. Rockefeller. And John D. Rockefeller went before the Supreme Court and said, I developed this industry and it's my industry and you're trying to break me up. And the judges said, yes, we are. The monopolies of today are illegal to the Sherman Antitrust Act. You are to sell off your companies You sell off your company in 6 months. And so that was the sentence. That same afternoon, James Buck Duke comes in, the same thing, and the Supreme Court busted him up and said, you will sell your company off in 6 months. And those two companies, the Tobacco and Oil Trust, they sold them off to about 6 or 8 companies, made them 6 or 8 companies. They made far more money as owners of those companies, as stockholders, than they ever would have by themselves. So the Supreme Court ruled this is a monopoly. A monopoly stifles entrepreneurship and capitalism. And it's a bad thing because you, as a monopoly, you control that whole market. You don't own that market. You need capitalists, entrepreneurs to move this industry forward. So then there was many other monopolies out there, or trusts out there. And through this process, they were all busted up and entrepreneurship took over, only to be interrupted by the Fed, because the money guys then said, what are we going to do with our money? Because we can't hide it with a trust. So they went down to Jekyll Island and they created the Federal Reserve and the IRS. And that's how that all came to be. So the deep state started back then and still runs today.
Man, you brought that all the way around. Well, I'm like, wait, how did...
Okay, now that goes back to yesterday.
Yes. Oh my God. Oh my God.
So now the deep state, they roamed through the teens. World War I comes up. Then you had the boom of the 20s, and then the depression of the 30s, and then World War II came out. So now we get up into the 40s and the 50s, when President Eisenhower was president. The deep state was well entrenched in this country. I mean, well entrenched. You could not get them out. So then the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, up and through today, the deep state rules and controls. So when President Trump was running for presidency, he said he was going to drain the swamp. Well, the drain the swamp is the deep state. And their congressmen, their senators, the bureaucrats are all there, and they're doing a fine job. That's why they're desperate to get Trump out of office. If they can't get him out of office, they know his next election is going to be pretty brutal on those folks. So that's my story about the deep state.
Well, that's okay. That was history. That was, I mean, I knew that those things were semi-related. I knew about the Rockefellers somehow, somewhat. I'd heard about them before. I heard of the name Duke before previously, and I know Donald Trump is always talking about draining the swamp. That's it, because he comes from the private sector as a business owner. So his take on it is completely different than just the average politician. My question is, why does he care? What makes it important to drain the swamp?
Well, he loves this country. I mean, this country is everything to him. And we saw that H.W. Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama were the reasons that he exported 70 or 60,000 manufacturing plants out of this country under their watch that went to Asia. So much of our industry was offshored to Asia. Now, as you know, today they're screaming, why don't we have supplies in our country that we can be self-sufficient? It's all coming out of China. China controls our market, medicine, manufacturing, many things that comes from China, because China's made, as Trump says, $500 billion a year off of us. They've completely rebuilt their infrastructure, and with our money. And now we're sitting here saying they could cut us off. We can't even, all the penicillin comes out of China. Most medical things come out of China. And so why do we let our politicians and our corporate officials, the CEOs, the top echelon of these corporations, offshore all this stuff to China? The real reason I feel it is they had a big payola deal going. So the Chinese people would exchange for bringing those companies to to China, they would pay off the politicians and pay off the bureaucrats. Now, back many years ago when this first started, I saw auctions at paper mills and steel mills where they would auction the place off. The Chinese would come in there, they would box up all the equipment and ship it to China. Now, the good news is that was old technology they got. We got new technology that can oversee them and run them out of business. But back then, they took that, and it was the destruction of the middle class that created the problems, and they were hurt badly. Now, out of the 60,000 companies that went overseas, Trump has gotten 12,000 back. There's only 48,000 more to come back into this country. So Trump is going to make this country the biggest and the best in the world. And the Democrats and the socialists cannot stand it. They're going crazy.
So do you think that coronavirus was an attempt to topple it over?
Well, I listen to the news like you do. And so basically the coronavirus was developed there in, what is it, Wuhan, China? Wuhan, China. George Soros has a chemical plant over there to make bad stuff. So the from what I see and hear, as you do, the biological materials coming out of Wuhan is there to set the world on its butt, and they did, because this thing has been a tremendous distraction. And a lot of people are dying, a lot of people are dead, and a lot of people are sick because of what they did. Now, the Chinese people didn't transfer this information early. They let it sink in. They had a lot of people in Wuhan on a big convention or whatever it was over there, and they spread those guys throughout the whole world. And that's why this baby spread so fast and so quick.
Wow.
So that's the deep state at work.
So what made you interested in deep state, or how did you get the information that you have? But I mean, besides studying history, and I clearly like watching the news, but I mean, what gives you your drive to want to know these things, or why talk about it?
Well, my great grandfather put together a scrapbook back in the early 1900s, and so he had the newspaper articles of the day about the barn burnings, the warehouse burnings, and all the things that was going on with the night riders, the tobacco wars. And that was the beginning of the deep state back then. So as a kid, me and my brother and sister and cousins would look at this scrapbook, pull it out from under the couch, and read about these horrible stories, which were fascinating to us. And I still have the scrapbook today, but it's locked up.
Wow. So he lived through it.
Great grandpa Kenny lived through it. He was, his name was George Washington Kinney. So he was a tobacco buyer selling to the trust.
Wow.
My other great grandfather's name was George Washington Jett, and he was the night rider. So one night, he brought his night riders, 20 or 30 of them,
Wow.
up to our log house in Kentucky with torches lit, and drug him out of the house at 1 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning, horsewhipped him badly. He never got over it. And then burned down all of our tobacco barns. Then they went on into Brooksville, Kentucky. George Staton was a tobacco buyer. He had a warehouse full of tobacco, about 50,000 pounds of it. And the night riders drug him out of the house in Brooksville, tied his feet to a rope. The rope went to the horn of the saddle. They drug him through the streets of drug him through the streets of Brooksville, took him out to where his warehouse was, stood him up, and then burned the warehouse down. So the night riders were bad, but they thought they were entitled because the trust had beaten the night riders up so bad that they wanted to protect the crops and protect the livelihood of the farmers that's beaten down so bad. So it was a great story. And that's where the deep state started, and it still exists today, and it's not going away.
So you literally, by heritage, blood, all of that, are related to both sides of this.
Both sides of it, night riders and tobacco buyers.
So how did they end up, who married who? How did put together? What's that? How did that happen?
When the tobacco wars were going on, the kids were young. So as the war is over with, they get married in the teens. So George Washington Jett's daughter was Alma Jett, and George Washington Kinney's son was Tom Kinney. And so they, Bragg County is a small county. So they get together and they get married and have siblings, my mother, my Aunt Georgie, Aunt Millie, and Uncle Tom. And then George Washington Jett's kids were Alma Kinney and Hobart Kinney. I mean, Alma Jett and Hobart Jett. And so they got married, and we intermingled, and things went on. So, yeah, I'm on both sides of the fence.
Wow. That's a really deep history.
Mhm.
So
It's very deep.
is that what made you begin to really study it, between the scrapbooks from your great grandfather and then just trying to find out your own history? Is that how you came upon all this information?
No. What happened is of course, my great grandfather, George Washington Kinney, passed away and gave the scrapbook to his son, Tom Kinney. And then Tom Kinney passed away, senior, and gave it to his son, Tom Kinney, junior. And then Tom passed away back some years ago at the age of 87. And his wife, Joanne True Kinney, got the scrapbook. So I called her up one day. I said, Joanne, now that your housekeeping's been broken up because the kids broke up her housekeeping and she moved in with them in Maysville, Kentucky, I said, where's all the antiques? The antiques came down the Ohio River on flat-bottom boats after the American Revolutionary War that we were involved in. So she said, Jimmy, we gave the antiques, or my daughters, Judy, Hope, and Martha, got the antiques. I said, where's all the guns? Tom had lots of guns. He said, well, Jim, the guns went to your cousin Joe, so he's got all the guns. I said, the grandkids didn't get any? Nope. The grandkids didn't get any. Joe's got them all. Well, Joanne, where's the Night Rider book? Well, Jimmy, you get the Night Rider book. And that's how I got it.
Wow. So she already knew who was supposed to get it. She just hadn't given it to you yet.
That's right.
Wow.
But I always had an interest in it. She says, you're the only one in the family's got interest in the Night Rider book. I said, okay, I'll take care of it.
Mhm.
So that's where the book came from, out of the Night Rider book.
So are you passing this information down now to your children and grandchildren? Like, do they get to hear stories like this too? Or are
Well,
they even interested?
the daughters have always heard the stories. The one daughter, Shirley, she's the one who does the history of the family. And the other daughter, Vicky, she's always remembers the stories I told many years ago. And then Stephanie, and we worked together in the office. She's the one that really promoted me. Says you got to write this. Joanne gave you the book to write something about this. So then I've been promoting the Night Riders, the Tobacco Wars, and the Deep State ever since. Only past 4 or 5 years.
So you've got books out.
Yeah, books are called the Tobacco. Our webpage is thetobaccowars.com. And also on Twitter, it's at Tobacco Wars. So you can get those there. You get the book on Amazon. It's there. So we've sold, several hundred, maybe 1,000 or so. So it's a great history book. One guy in Kentucky would like to have the state of Kentucky school system put this in the junior high school classes for history. History needs to be told. It's been taken out of the programs, but history needs to be told.
One of the problems I find with history is that, I mean, I'm 47, and so history as I learned it seems different than history as our kids are learning it. Like they come say something like, no, that's not what happened. That's not how that story goes. And their thought process on the founding fathers, what went on back then, is completely different than what we learned in school.
Well, the lefties change history to their liking. They don't want history told. They've dumbed down the kids for many, many years. When the mothers went to work back 30, 40 years ago, the schools took over and they rule and they put the curriculum as they want to see it.
So thetobaccowars.com is the website, and it's on the screen for anybody that wants to go investigate that. And I hope I spelled everything right because I was over here looking at tobacco. I'm like, T-O. For anybody that wants to go and investigate that, you all can.
Yeah.
And
It's TOBACCO.
got it.
Okay.
Tobacco.
I promise I did. I was down here like, let me see. Because I didn't want to spell it wrong. That was gonna be embarrassing. So, and we'll put it back up before we end the broadcast. Sharika, did you have any questions for Jim?
Only question I would have, so with President Trump trying to remove the deep state, how much effect do you think that would have on us, on the country of him, if he was to actually get it removed and stuff as he would like?
What he wants to do is reverse of what the liberal Democrats want to do. He wants to free up the people who have jobs, who have businesses, who are free to endeavor prosperity in this country. And it can be done very, very quickly if we get the bureaucrats and the lefty liberals out of the way. And they got to be voted out of office come November. They got to go. They absolutely have no right to be doing what they want to do. You got Nancy Pelosi and Schumer, who are just two big jerks out there trying to change history and change the way of thinking, and they're completely off base, and they need to be removed from office. I'd say most Democrats need to be removed from office. Here in the state of Ohio, we have Sherrod Brown, who's a Democrat, lefty guy. He needs to go. We need to put the country back as it was to the Constitution.
And so do you think that would make things, because that when Donald Trump came out with Make America Great Again,
right,
people began to take that as being some type of prejudice or some type of bigotry or some type of they said he was racist, they said all kinds of things, and anybody that was African American that supported him took heat. So when he's talking about Make America Great Again, in his mind, according to what you're saying, it's about returning America back to its capitalist roots, where entrepreneurs are be able to do what they need to do, and people are making money, and prosperity is a thing. Back to like industrial revolution times, and times where we are the machine that the rest of the world is getting their goods from, instead of the other way around.
That's correct.
But that's not what people see. That's not what people see, because the people, over half of the people, well, I won't say over half, quite a few of the people that want that also want racist endeavors, and they support him too. So how do you differentiate between the people that genuinely just want to see people prosper, get rid of welfare, get educations, go get jobs? How do you differentiate those people from the people who genuinely, this pollen is not my friend. How do you differentiate those people from the people who genuinely want to see the whole country prosper? How do we fix that problem?
Well, as Trump says, we're not going to be a socialist country. The left, Democrats, liberal want this to be a socialist country. We're not going to go that way. The only thing that's keeping them at bay is all the guns that's in America. There's got to be 300 to 500 million guns out here, and we're not going to give them up. And they want those guns they control, just like Hitler did, and Mussolini did, and Lenin and those guys did back in the early turn of the century when they got rid of the Tsar. They killed the Tsar's family. And so they know that without capturing the guns, which they're trying to put gun control in everywhere, especially in Ohio, but he backed off. Those guns are going to stay with the people, and that's what keeps them at bay. The prosperity of entrepreneurship and capitalism is everything. That's what founded this country. We tried, Captain John Smith tried socialism back in Jamestown in 1620, and it backfired because half the people would work and half the people wouldn't work. So then he got rid of the commune and the group working for food and gave everybody an individual plot, and then everybody worked. But socialism will not work. Take a look at Venezuela. It's a disaster down there. People are starving to death. And that's what the left wants here, because then they would control the people and control everything that goes on in this country. And we don't want that. Get rid of them. They got to get out of office.
Well, right. I mean, have you been to the grocery store lately? Right now, we look real socialistic right now. The coronavirus is looking like a socialist country. I drove by Kroger and these people are lined up because they can only go in, and I'm floored because I was like, this looks like some type of weird third world apocalyptic crazy movie that I watch with the kids driving through Kroger's parking lot. And I'm like, what is this? And so the virus has us on this 1984
book.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. And when I read that as a kid, in my mind, I never thought that was going to be around. Like
It's today. Anyway, this gives the millennials a taste of socialism. What's going on right now? So hopefully they can stomach it.
So is it fair to say that you believe if we don't start putting the right people in place, that's what we're going to be looking forward to going further?
Get the wrong guys in there. You keep the Pelosi's and the Schumer in there, and that's what you're looking at, because that's what they want. They want to control the populace, and you cannot control the populace.
And my older boys love Bernie Sanders because they think, well, no, Mom, he's this and he's that, and he's got all these young people, and because they've adapted this "you only live once" YOLO sort of an attitude. And I think we learned a term yesterday, moral, oh Lord, help me Shrika. The term that we learned yesterday, where it's basically you don't have a moral compass, there's no morality, there's no judgment. You just do whatever it is that you think in your mind is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bernie Sanders is a communist. That's all he is. He spent time in Moscow, got married over there. He is a communist, and he believes that the country should be a communist country and the people should be controlled like they do in Russia and China and other countries, Venezuela. He's a communist, and he is not worth anything. He's never been successful in anything. He's never had a job, and he's got no business being a politician in America.
Wow. So now tell me a little bit more about that with Bernie. So you're saying that he's never had a job. When you say that, what do you mean? Because I know he was a civil rights leader or hung out with the civil rights leaders, should I say. And he did a lot of stuff that they credit him for. So why is Bernie such a bad person? Like what's wrong with him?
He's never gone to work anywhere. He's always been running for office. He runs for mayor of a city. He runs for congressman. He runs for the Senate. He runs for all these things. But he's never had to make a payroll. He's never had a company. He's never done anything as a capitalist or entrepreneur. He is a socialist, communist, bureaucrat.
So he's a career politician.
He's the deep state guy.
Wow. Okay. So how, in your opinion, besides just looking at the obvious things that we have to change, the obvious things that we have to change, like, for example, do you think Donald's going to get reelected? As if everything stays how it is right now, do you think he'll get reelected?
Yes, he will. People, we love this guy. Now, the lefties don't love him. The Democrats don't love him. But there's enough people that's going from Democrats to Republicans are getting rid of the deep state stuff. People have had it, and once you get the American people riled up, you can't stop us, and we're riled up.
I know we talked yesterday with our other guest, and we were talking about the stimulus thing and the $2 trillion that they fought over, which I was really disturbed by that, because it was like, okay, you're saying that the economy needs help, and then when you open up this bill, y'all just stuck all this other stuff that nobody cares about into this bill to try and sneak it past the American people. And so then they began to have these bipartisan fights back and forth over this bill, when clearly the stock market's crashing. We've got to do something, and you guys are fighting. And so the bill passing and the American people seeing, no, Donald Trump is for the people and he wants to help everybody. I think that's going to turn a tide with a lot of communities where they might not have voted for him before, but because they watched the Democratic Party pack this thing with fluff, that now they're like, nah, we're just going to go ahead and stick with the guy we got and just take our chances and see what happens.
Well, Nancy Pelosi got a $25 million grant into the arts. What was the arts?
The Kennedy Center.
Okay, $5 million of that money went to the Democrat political campaign. Check that one out.
And see, that's the thing. I think this is why we need more shows and more people putting out information, because a lot of people that's voting and a lot of people that sway one way or the other doesn't have a lot of knowledge. It's a lot of missing knowledge out here. And it's things that people are not knowing when they're going to these polls and voting. They don't know. They don't have a lot of information voting. A lot of people vote for who sound good or who's a certain party. They're not voting because this is the best person to run the country.
But if you take CNN, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, all the liberal news guys, they're promoting this as fast as they can promote it. And they're lying through the teeth. It's called fake news, and they are really into fake news, and they believe in that.
Well, I know when I watch the news, I tend to be a Fox kid only because I don't care about. Listen, I'm not necessarily a Donald Trump fan, but I'm not against him either. I know that I know he's not a politician, so some stuff is hard for him simply because he's not used to the stuff that they're doing. He just knows how to run a company, and he looks at the United States. This is how you run a business. This country needs to be run like a business. So that's how he runs it. But when I start watching the news and you click on CNN and MSNBC, they're arguing all they talk about is what he's not doing. Sweetie, that's not what's important right now when you got people laying in hospital beds and people are dying. But their emphasis is, look at Donald Trump. Look what he's not doing. Why don't you let's look at something else. Don't keep pushing, oh, he's bad, he's bad, he's bad, he's bad. And then you're not. Like, I'll watch him give a speech, and then when you turn to CNN, I'm like, how did y'all swing that to make it sound? That's not what he said. I just watched it.
Okay, you must understand that those mainstream media are an extension of the Democratic Party. That's their sounding board. Just like in Hitler back in World War II, before World War II, Hitler said, "Give me your young, and in 10 years I'll change the country," and he did. So he had propaganda machines going all the time.
Yeah.
The Democrats now have propaganda machines going all the time with CNN, MSNBC, CBS, all those guys, and they're pushing that to the limit. It's not working this time, and they're going to get their butt kicked.
So why don't we have why is Fox the only news outlet and they can only do so much?
That's right. They can only do so much
without getting shut down or taken off the air.
Well, they're doing a good job.
Why are they the only one? Why are they the only one that are conservative, that push Christian values, that aren't afraid to pray or say Jesus? That they're the only ones that will talk about. I've heard them openly talk about God. They bring pastors on. They're the only ones that do that. Nobody else is just. Why is there not another network that does that?
Because they are in bed with the Democratic Party, the liberal lefties. They thrive on this, and that's what they're after. They want to change the country. and we're not going to let them do it. It's been a great show, girls. Boy,
Yes.
you're feisty. You're tough.
But we like to know, because we know that there's a lot of knowledge that's not getting out, and we know that we have a following, so we want our people to know, okay, this is what you don't know, this is what y'all need to hear. So that's our
Buy my book,
we definitely
Tobacco,
will.
Trust, and Trump, on Amazon.
Okay. So you said it's called Tobacco. See,
Tobacco,
T-O-B-A-C-C-O.
T-A-B-T-O-B-A-C-C-O.
Wait, hold on. Okay.
Tobacco, Trust,
One
and
of those
Trump.
words, man. All right, I'm gonna put it on the screen, and you said it's on Amazon.
Yes.
Tobacco, Trust, and
There it
Trump.
is.
There it is, and it's on Amazon for anybody that wants to check it out. So any closing words, Jim? Anything that you want everybody to know? Something. If you had one final word to just say, okay, y'all do this or go.
Yep. This is it. Vote for Trump and get rid of the Democrats. Very simple.
Look, that's it. That's all.
That's it. Girls, you're a pleasure. You guys are a work of art.
Well, we're definitely unique in our sphere of influence. So
I see you are.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But if you go to our webpage, the tobaccowars.com, all my radio shows are there, and all the video. We got some videos and a lot of information. So very informative. So take a look.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. It was so nice having you on the show today, Jim. You have been. I got a whole history lesson because I didn't know that all that stuff was interconnected like that.
Nobody knows. Very few. Anyway, keep up the good work, ladies.
Thank
you so much. You have been watching The Conversation. You guys stay tuned because we've got more interesting stuff to come. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.